the long-awaited
Caramel Apple Bochet.
So we've been planning this one for a couple of weeks, and we've had some difficulties with various things, like getting the right fermenter for this. More on that in a little while. But this is a caramel apple bochet, so it's going to be cooked honey. It's going to have cooked apples in it. It's also going to have apple juice, some spices, and of course, honey. So, what do we got to do first?
Okay, so we're going to start by bochetting our honey. And to do that, we're using a crock pot because that's going to have a nice, calm, even temperature. And hopefully we'll be able to avoid the problems we had with our original bochet.
Okay, so to make a bochet, you have to bochet the honey, which literally means to cook it. Now, we've done this before, and I'm a little bit gun-shy about doing it. So what we've decided to do is we're going to use half and half. And we're going to use a slow cooker, so it's a little bit of a different method. It's a lot more gentle. So what we're going to do is measure out 1 pound of our honey into the slow cooker.
So to do that, we're using our old scale, which maxes out at 50 pounds, because we're actually going to weigh it in this. All right, we're using our Florida Sweet Squeeze Wildflower Honey.
Now we're going to put that in the slow cooker on high. And everything that I've read, people say, well, you want it on high for about the first 2 to 3 hours, and then they put it to low for the last couple. What I'd like to do, though, is we're going to get a small sample of that and just touch it on a piece of paper like everybody does when they do a bochet. Okay, so once the bochet is going, so to speak, we want to start preparing our apples. Now, there's some things in apples that you really don't want in your brew, like the core and the seeds. They do contain a very tiny amount of cyanide, or it produces cyanide in your stomach. It's more technical. So we just want to eliminate them. They also can add a little bit of a bitter flavor, so we definitely don't want those in there.
We do, however, want to keep the skins, because the skins, as you know, like any rind of a fruit, add tannins to your beverage, and that's yummy. So what I'm going to do is take this core and simply core the apples.
By the way, if you're wondering why we're on opposite sides.
It's because you have entered Bizarro World.
No, I burned my hand yesterday, and it's kind of painful.
Yeah.
So she's not letting me do anything today.
I'm starting to think that there's a bit of a curse towards the caramel apple bochet, and I don't know if it's just happiness and joy from the year 2020 or what, but this is our third attempt at making this video, and Brian's hand is kept underneath the table because he's partially mummified. So I'm going to be doing all the heavy lifting today. Ha ha ha.
She's not letting me do anything.
No, it's bad. But we're making this video, gosh darn it.
So what she's going to do is just remove the cores from these apples, and we're just going to cut them into sections. Kind of like if you're making an apple pie. If you don't have an apple core like this, what I usually do is I cut them in half, and cut each of those in half, and then I just kind of cut on the bias, cutting that core right out of it. No big deal.
There's one.
Yeah, so we're going to do this, and it might be fast forwarded.
I'm going.
So now we've got our apples cored, it's time to cut them up. And we want pieces that have a little chunk to them, but not too big, because if it's too small, it'll burn in the oven, versus too big, it won't actually caramelize the sugars within it.
So you know what? We're in a desperate situation.
Yeah.
And Brian allows me to handle a knife.
I didn't have any say in the matter. So basically, we're quartering the apple and then halving the quarters.
Done!
Okay, now we need to face these so that they're all going to cook properly. And what I mean by that is we're just going to make sure that they're all laying like on their sides and not piled up on top of each other so that we can bake them. In case you're wondering, these are Fuji apples. Why Fuji apples?
Because they're Brian's favorite.
Exactly. I happen to really like Fuji apples. It's just a thing. I find them nice and sweet. They're an apple flavor that I actually appreciate. Them mixed with the apple juice will actually create a really nice apple flavor for this Cyser. It's actually a Cyser, not just a Bochet. So this is just like all kinds of crazy names, this particular mead.
If you watch our cooking channel and you got to see the applesauce video, we use Fuji apples in that as well.
Now we're going to bake these in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure exactly how long because I want to see them shrink a little bit, but I don't want them to burn. So it's probably going to be 30 to 45 minutes, but I'm going to keep an eye on them just to, verify how they're doing. Now something I want to talk about just briefly is we've had some questions where people say, oh, I have this or I have this. How much of this should I add to a mead? The problem with questions like that is it's so open-ended. There's so many ways that it can go, and it doesn't even really depend on what yeast you're using. It's really more personal preference. What do you want it to be? And then you can go from there. We don't really like to make up recipes on the fly that way because it's kind of not fair to everybody else.
We may look like we're kind of haphazard, fly by our pants kind of recipe makers.
And sometimes we are.
But normally, and particularly in this case, that is not the case at all. And we're actually going to do a brew talk video where Brian explains more about our process and how we come up with the ingredients and the amounts and the process, what we do to those ingredients and amounts to make a recipe.
And I'm going to use this video, this recipe, as an example in that, just to show you where it started and what it ended up becoming. And then over time, it'll actually get adjusted as we're making it too. But there's ideas, there's experience, there's intent, and then there's the outcome.
And there's math.
Yeah. Okay, so now all of our apples are on the tray. I got the oven preheating at 350. I'm just going to put these in there and...
We're back!
So it's been about 2 hours on the Bochet honey, and everything that I read said you won't see much difference for up to 4 hours. Well, not in our case. I guess maybe our crock pot's a little hotter than most, but I also read that fructose is the main sugar component of honey, and that one starts to burn at 230 degrees Fahrenheit. I checked the temperature, we were at 275. So there's definitely more of an acrid smell in the air now. It's definitely cooked. We stopped it. It's got to be done. At the 2 hour mark, as you can see in the diagram, it's showing very, very dark. Okay, so I don't want to go any further than that. But what we want to do now is get it out of there and into the fermenter.
Okay, so it started bubbling slightly at the 15-minute mark. And then at the 1 hour mark, it was really active, foaming, and everything.
Yeah, something of note. If you decide to do this, make sure that the container you boil this in or cook this in is at least 3 to 4 times bigger than the volume of honey you're working with, because it will foam up and foam over, and this stuff is napalm. It's just going to stick to you and burn. Yeah. So what we want to do now is add some water to this to cool it down and thin it up so that we can get it into a fermenter.
All right, so you can see from this overhead view all the foam and crusty from the cooking of it. And I'm going to pour some water in here, but I'm going to do it very slowly, because there's a chance that it could start bubbling vigorously. It's foaming a little bit, you can see on this side, but it's not as bad as what we've seen before.
So now that we added the water, we're just going to mix it up, basically just to try to get everything off the sides, make sure nothing's stuck, that sort of thing. It lowers the temperature nice and quick as well. Since that was at about 275 a little bit ago, now it's down to 130 already, which that's almost pitching temperature. 30 degrees hot, but we're getting closer. While she's mixing that up, I want to talk about this. This is something you guys haven't seen yet. We were waiting for these to arrive so that we could make this brew, because this is a 1.4 gallon container. That way I can put in all the fruit and everything you can still see inside it, and we still get a 1 gallon in the end. These effectively replace our 2 gallon buckets. I was never really truly happy with the buckets. I don't like to use plastic buckets if possible. And these have a wide mouth, so it's perfect for a replacement for the wide mouth.
And they're glass.
And they're glass. It also comes with a little rubber stopper, so you can stick an airlock in there. Beautiful. They do come with their own plastic airlock. I don't even have one here because I probably threw them away already. They're junk. Don't use it. It actually has a hole in the bottom and a hole in the top. And if I was a fruit fly, I'd just fly in the bottom, fly in the top, and I'm in that brew. It doesn't do anything that an airlock is supposed to do. I don't understand. Everything else about this was designed so well. Why would they screw up that? But I guess if you don't have an airlock at all, it's better than literally nothing. But
I'm thinking potentially you're supposed to put a little bit of sanitizer liquid in the top little cap part, but Brian was so irritated with it that we're not going to bother. We're just going to stick with what we know.
They actually came with little silicone bungs to fit airlocks too, so why not just do that? But I'm pretty excited about these. This is... Some reviews I read said that they were thin. This is super heavy duty. This is more heavy duty than most of the fermenters we work with. No problem. But what I really like is this. We have another surprise fermenter coming. It's a 2-gallon fermenter. Happens to be plastic, but at least it's 2-gallon. This is 1.4. So that means if I started something in 2 gallons and I had to rack it to something a little smaller, I have a 1.4. If I started something in 1.4, or if I have something in a 1.4 and I need to rack it to something smaller, I have a gallon. Then we have the wide mouth gallon. It's a little smaller than that. Then I have a 3-liter bottle. Then I have a half gallon. You see where I'm going with this, right? We have bottles and containers in various sizes on purpose to keep the headspace to a minimum when we rack to secondary. How's that looking?
It's looking like a...
Looks like a mess.
Mess cooked honey.
Okay, my estimate before of 130 was wrong. That's 160. But it's okay, because what I'd like to do now, I think, is we're going to start measuring the honey into this container, and we'll add the apple juice. We'll let that cool for just a little bit longer, although I don't think it's going to cool much sitting in a black ceramic bowl. So, all right, so while we're waiting for that to cool, we're just going to measure out our pound of honey. And again, it's the same honey as before. We're just going to get it into this fermenter. Okay, so now that we have our 1 pound of honey in there, we're going to add our apple juice. And this is a half-gallon container of apple juice. It's from Aldi, and the ingredients are apple juice from concentrate, ascorbic acid, vitamin C. Okay, those things are perfectly fine to use. They're basically there just to keep the color. That's all it really is. But we're just going to put a half-gallon in now. Fine, you do it. Okay, so to mix this up, we're going to need my spoon of unusual size. Okay. We're going to mix this up before we add the other honey in, because this gives a nice large base of fluid to cool that down even more. And then we'll take the temperature of that too. Okay, now comes the dangerous part. This thing is probably... Oh, it's not even that hot anymore. If I can touch it with my bare hand, it's actually not that hot. I have very sensitive hands, as evidenced. You know. But this was 450 degrees. Okay, so...
I'm going to stand up and chop my head off.
Yep. The idea is we want to get that into here without spilling it everywhere. And now we mix again. Notice the color. Instantly dark brown. But that's what we're going for here. We have caramelized apples that you'll see those in a minute. We have caramelized the honey, adding those flavors in. Let me just take a temp. 94. We're good. This is totally safe at this point. We want to be under 100 degrees when we pitch yeast. I just really like that number. You can go as high as 110, but beyond that, you start having risk of damaging your yeast. All right, so our apples, we baked these for close to an hour at 350 degrees. Now, I didn't preheat the oven, so really it's probably about 45 minutes at a preheated 350. What I want to do, though, is we're going to put this bag right into that fermenter, leaving it over the side. And we're just going to put the apples right in there. And you might think, well, shouldn't you mash them up? They've been cooked through. They're pretty soft. So cooking and freezing both break up the cell walls, making all the sugars available to the yeast. You gotta remember, yeast are microscopic creatures. They're going to get in those little holes that we can't even see. But this is why we wanted this fermenter for this job. All those apples take up a lot of space. I still wanted to get a full gallon out of this, so in comes the 1.4 gallon. By the way, we let those apples cool to room temperature before we added them.
All right, so we're only going to put the apples in the bag. So I'm going to go ahead and tie this up.
And the reason only the apples are going to be in the bag is because that way we can remove them after a week or two, just for safety's sake. Not that it's really that big of a problem, but I like to get them out when we can. The spices, however, being that we're using a minimal amount, I'm going to let them stay in a little bit longer. Until we rack the first time, anyway. Can you tell she was a Girl Scout?
So today's spices are 1 cinnamon stick.
I'm just kind of poking it in there.
1 whole clove. And 3 allspice berries.
Now, the last time we did this in the Methaglen, people were asking, well, couldn't you put those in secondary? Yes, absolutely you can. I am more of a set it and forget it kind of guy. I like to put things into primary if possible. Now, can that cause problems? Yes. But again, we're only using 1 cinnamon stick, 1 clove, 3 allspice berries. I've done double that and not had a problem. So we don't really have to worry about the antibiotic properties of those things in this particular brew. It's so nutrient rich, I don't think we're going to have much trouble.
I think we need a little bit more water.
We definitely do.
Okay.
Now at this point, we can either add more water or more apple juice. We're opting for water since this is already a pretty high gravity brew.
Tell me when to stop.
I would stop about there for now. Now what I want to do is just give this a little bit of a mix around, and then we're going to take a reading on it. And then we'll see if we need more water or not. Right now, I'm pretty happy with the amount of headspace we have, if this thing decides to foam up like most things we've been doing lately do.
Now we know our gravity reading isn't going to be 100% accurate on all the sugars that we have added in here, because we know the sugars that are still in the apples still need to be extracted into the brew. But we also know that a lot of those sugars in those apples, because we cooked them, are non-fermentable.
Just like in the Bochet honey. And that's something that we want to talk about in the other video where we talk about how we planned it out, but I'll just touch on it briefly. I calculated that those apples have about 0.020 gravity worth of sugars in them. It's hard to know how much we cooked out, like how much of it became non-fermentable. So if I go with, say, half, right? That means they add 0.010 gravity to this must. Well, we also have 2 pounds of honey in there. Well, those 2 pounds of honey, one of them got cooked. So what if half of that is now non-fermentable sugars? You're just making a mess.
I know, I don't do this.
See? Everybody thinks my job is so easy, don't they? Anyway, it is floating, so you're good. You don't need to worry about it. Okay.
If I were Brian, I would be freaking out right now because of this.
You sticky?
Yes.
We have a 1.118 reading right now. I'm actually pretty okay with that. We could add more honey, but this is a nice starting gravity because it's not too high, it's not too low. We are going to be using Lalvin 71B for this particular brew, also known as Lalvin 71B-1122 for those of you keeping track at home. I know that that is a 14% yeast, but it also goes higher on occasion when it has the proper amount of nutrition and proper conditions. These are the perfect conditions for this one to explode. So I figure, this might go dry. We can always just back sweeten and add more later. Not really a problem. But I am going to pour this right back in and let Derica go clean her hands. Okay, so we have a couple other things that we want to add. Lately we've been using yeast hulls as a nutrient for our yeast, and they worked so well that I actually want to continue using them.
In our last brew that we used them in, the hibiscus mead, they actually worked a little too well.
Right.
So we're not going to go for the full half a teaspoon. Instead, we're going to do 1/4 of a teaspoon.
Right. So that way we're using half the amount. That way anything that might have been missed with the apples or anything like that is going to get made up for with the yeast hulls. I think 1/4 teaspoon is fine. And last but not yeast, it is yeast, is our Lalvin 71B. Now, normally, I would use half a packet for up to 3 gallons and a full packet for over 3 gallons. But I'm starting to learn that there's a time and a place for everything. And to me, this brew has so many things going for it, but it also has a lot of non-fermentable sugars that could hurt the yeast. So I'm going to use a whole pack today. I was debating on this back and forth. We are actually going to be doing a test on a 1 gallon to see, should you use half a packet or a full packet? Because for years people have been telling me, oh, just use the whole thing. And I always thought it was a little bit wasteful. But if it really does improve the brew and its health along the way, then that's a reason to do it. If it just makes it go faster in the beginning, I don't really care about that. But if it actually improves the brew and the health of that brew, now I'm all for it. So let's just dump in that whole packet. It's in front of the fermenter.
I can't see.
By the way, I smelled this. It literally smells like apple pie.
We're at good temp, right?
Oh yeah, we're fine. We're fine. We were at 94 degrees before we put in the apples. And now, try to just kind of get everything submerged. It's not really critical. Look at her. She's trying to take it from my hand even now. I'm left-handed, so it's awkward to use my right hand for certain things. By the way, in case anyone was concerned about my hand, it's fine. It's just going to take a few days to heal. It's still relatively raw, and I'm taking medications to help with the pain and things like that. But it'll be fine. Maybe a scar. Make me all manly. I'll add it to the collection.
Yeah, I was going to say, add it to your collection.
The idea here is I really want as much under the liquid as possible, because if it's not in the liquid, it's not adding to the liquid. That simple. And it has a potential possibility, maybe it could mold or cause bacteria. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So something about these is I really like this lid that they have. It comes with a hole in the middle, and there's a cap that's off screen right now that actually closes that up. So you can use it as a closed vessel too, which is great. They're screw-on lids. I can't see that leaks. It's got such a wide gap here with all the threads. That's going to be a nice airtight seal. It's also got a sealing gasket inside. That's a wonderful thing. It comes with these teeny tiny little bungs, which I love. I think that's great. Works with a regular style airlock. So you're good.
Now, because this lid is plastic and it does have the foam cushion to help with the seal, I wouldn't leave this in the sanitizer for an extended period of time. I put the glass jar in first, and then I just dunked this in there and then set it out. I didn't want it to be soaking because I think that would damage the seal.
Now, the way we did this, I'm going to end up with as much product as we possibly can get. I might have been able to add more liquid to it. We could have used apple juice, but I wanted to see how this works out. We've never used this fermenter before. But taking that bag out, when we do, there's going to be juices in there. And I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere in this level, which is going to be close to 3/4 to a gallon. So that way, when we rack off of the lease and everything like that, we end up with as much product as we can. About as much as if we had used a whole juice recipe in a regular 1-gallon container. That's the intent. We'll see what happens.
So from this point out, all we're going to do to this is we're going to give it the swirl. So, like that.
This is going to sit for a couple of days, and then we'll see if it starts up. Okay, if it doesn't start up, then we'll have to determine what to do then.
Brian couldn't take it anymore. We had to switch sides.
So here we are, maybe 30, 35 minutes into it, and as you can see, like that, there is activity in that airlock already, and that it's just further making me really want to do that test of yeast holes versus nothing. And let me just show you what's going on here.
It's also making me want to test the full packet with versus the half packet.
I think those are two different tests, though.
They are, but
we are going to test that.
I think those are the two variables that
Absolutely.
we're seeing that may be affecting the speed of
Yes.
fermentation.
And this is what we like to do. We come up with a theory, and we work on that theory for a while when it's working. And then, we get an idea. We try something different and go, oh, maybe we were wrong. Well, I'm okay with being wrong as long as we correct that and do it the right way. A lot of people have said, I found a video from 2.5 years ago where you were saying this, and now you're saying something different. Which should I follow? The latest one. Because that's how science works. You come up with a theory, and when that theory is proven false, you come up with a new theory until that one's proven false too.
That's
Constantly
one of the
improving.
Yeah, that's one of the exciting things about the whole City Steading project is that we are sharing information, not only what we're learning with you, but what you learn back to us so that we can share that again and just build and get better and better.
Anyway, let me give you a look at this. So now you're looking at that airlock and you can see bubbling happening quite clearly. However, when I look down inside the jar, I actually don't see much of that bubbling action that would be causing this to start up like this. So it's a little bit confusing.
I am seeing some movement on my side. If you watch I have more particles on my side than you do.
It's hard to see in this exact configuration. So what's going to happen next? Well, this is going to sit for probably a couple of weeks before we even take another reading on it. But what you're going to see is the next step in this video where we've already done the readings, racked it, and bottled it. So it'll be a little while. A lot of people have been asking because we changed our system of how we do the videos. So it probably will be a couple of months before you see the update, but you'll see everything all at once. If you like this video, we have over 200 cider, wine, mead, and beer videos on our channel.
Thank you for liking and subscribing.
And as always, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.